The day my uncle publicly called me a nobody was the day his life started falling apart. I remember every detail. The smell of roasted yam drifting across the village square. The sound of talking drums echoing through the ancient hills of Ijesaland. The bright colors of Aso filling the market grounds. And my uncle's finger pointing straight at my face. "You are nothing," he shouted. The crowd fell silent. Then he laughed. A few people laughed with him. I stood there holding a tray of cola nuts I had been hired to carry. Dust covered my sandals. Sweat soaked my shirt. I had barely eaten that morning. My uncle adjusted his expensive ibada and looked around at the crowd like a man who owned everything in his sight. He loved moments like this. "Your father died poor," he said. "This land belongs to me." The laughter grew louder. My chest burned. My hands shook around the tray. The cola nuts rattled softly. But I said nothing. Because for 20 years I had learned that arguing with powerful men only made poor people suffer more. I lowered my head and turned away. That was when I heard someone call my name from behind me. "Adebayo Adekunle." The voice was old. Firm. Authoritative. I turned. And my heart nearly stopped. Before I tell you what happened next, you need to understand where I came from. My father's name was Adekunle Ajayi. He was a farmer. A quiet man. A kind man. He owned 27 plots of land in Ijesaland. The cocoa farm alone was worth more than any house in our village. 4 generations of my family had worked that soil. My great-great-grandfather had cleared it with his own hands. My uncle's name was Baidun Ajayi, the older brother. When my father died, I was 8 years old. I remember the day my uncle came to the compound. He arrived with 3 men I had never seen before. They were carrying papers. My mother tried to ask questions. My uncle raised his hand to silence her. "These are the transfer documents," he said. "Adekunle signed them before he died. The land belongs to me now." My mother wept. She said my father would never sign such papers. She said he loved this land more than anything. My uncle shrugged. "Grief makes people see things that are not there," he said. "Pack your things." We left with a torn mat and a cooking pot. I looked back once as we walked away. My uncle was already standing at the entrance to the compound like he had lived there his whole life. That image never left me. Not once in 20 years. My mother found us a small room on the edge of a neighboring town. She cooked and washed clothes for other people to pay the rent. I carried loads at the market from the age of 10. By 12, I was running errands for traders. By 15, I was a general helper, carrying, fetching, cleaning, arranging. I never went past primary school. There was no money for secondary. But I read everything I could find. Old newspapers. Torn books from the market floor. Church bulletins. Any paper with words on it. I did not tell people about my father's land. I did not complain about my uncle. I did not ask anyone for help. My mother always said, "Silence is not weakness, Adebayo. Sometimes silence is the longest plan." I did not understand what she meant when I was young. By the time I was 28, I had begun to understand. But understanding did not feed me. Understanding did not pay my rent. So I carried trays. I wore borrowed sandals. I ate half portions. And I watched my uncle, from a distance, grow richer every year on land that had belonged to my father. Some mornings I woke up and felt nothing. That was the worst feeling. Not anger. Just nothing. Before we continue, if stories like this inspire you, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss an episode. Also, drop a comment below and tell us where you're watching from. We always enjoy seeing how far these stories reach and connecting with viewers from around the world. Now, let's get back to the story. The Ijesaland Yam Festival happened every year at the end of harvest. It was the biggest gathering in our area. Chiefs came from neighboring towns. Merchants set up stalls around the square. Drummers played from morning until night. The smell of roasted food filled the air for 3 days. I came to the festival not as a guest but as a worker. A food seller named Mama Toyin had hired me to carry kola nuts from her stall to the main canopy where the chiefs sat. 3 trips, 200 naira per trip. 600 naira total. That was enough to buy food for 4 days. I was on my second trip when I saw my uncle. He was standing near the chief's canopy in a deep blue agbada with gold embroidery along the collar. He was laughing loudly at something one of the other men had said. His shoes were polished. His cap was pressed. He saw me at almost the same moment I saw him. Something flickered across his face. Something that might have been discomfort. Then it disappeared. And something else replaced it. Something I had seen before. The look he always got when he wanted to remind himself, and everyone around him, of the difference between his life and mine. He squared his shoulders. He turned to the group of men beside him. Then he pointed. "Look," my uncle said loudly, pointing in my direction. "My late brother's son." The men around him turned. 28 years old, he continued. Still carrying trays. A few of them laughed. I kept walking. I focused on the tray. I focused on my feet. I told myself 600 naira. I told myself 4 days of food. But my uncle was not finished. He stepped forward, into my path, so that I had to stop. "Adebayo," he said. He was not speaking quietly. He wanted people to hear. People were already turning to watch. "How is life treating you?" he asked. I said nothing. "Still struggling?" He tilted his head. "That is what happens when a man has nothing behind him. No land. No name. No inheritance." He spread his hands wide. "Your father left you nothing, my son." The crowd that had formed was quiet. "You are nothing," he said. His voice rose. "And you will die nothing. Just like your father." Silence fell across that corner of the festival. Then someone near the back laughed. Then another person. Then a small wave of laughter moved through the crowd. My face was burning. My hands were shaking. But I said nothing. Because I had learned, 20 years of learning, that this was the only way to survive. I lowered my head. And I turned away. That was when I heard my name. Adebayo Adekunle. I turned slowly. The man standing behind me was old. Very old. His cap was white and perfectly placed on his gray head. He wore a purple and gold wrapper, the royal colors of the Ijesaland Palace. In his right hand, he carried a short staff with a carved wooden head that I recognized immediately. That staff meant one thing. He was the Oba's personal messenger. His name was Baba Latif. Every child in Ijesaland knew Baba Latif. You knew him not because you had met him but because you had been warned about him. When the Oba's personal messenger appeared, it was never a small matter. The talking drum stopped. The laughter from the crowd died completely. Even the food sellers stopped calling out their prices. Baba Latif did not look at anyone else. He looked only at me. His eyes were calm and direct. He walked forward with slow, deliberate steps until he stood directly in front of me. In his left hand, I noticed for the first time, he was carrying a worn leather pouch. Old and brown. Tied at the top with a thick cord. I had never seen that pouch before in my life. But somewhere in the back of my memory, something stirred. Something small and old and unformed. Baba Latif looked into my eyes. "Your father left this behind," he said. The words landed on me like a stone dropping into still water. Your father left this behind. My father had been dead for 20 years. I could not speak. I could not move. I just stood there in the middle of the yam festival with a tray of kola nuts in my hands and an old messenger in front of me and the world suddenly feeling like it had tilted sideways. Baba Latif held out the pouch. "He gave it to the Oba 30 years ago," Baba Latif said. "Before your uncle took the land. Before your father died. Eoba kept it in the palace treasury. He paused. Your father gave specific instructions. This pouch was to be delivered to you today. On this day. At this festival. In front of these people. He said that last part clearly. Deliberately. In front of these people. My uncle made a sound. Not a word. Just a sound. Like air leaving a small hole. I set the cola nut tray down slowly on the nearest table. Then I took the pouch. The leather was soft with age. Something was inside, small, hard, and heavy. There was also the slight crinkle of paper when I pressed the sides gently. I looked up. My uncle's face had changed completely. All the laughter, all the confidence, all the easy cruelty, gone. His eyes were locked on the pouch like a man watching a fire move towards something he cannot afford to lose. He recognized it. And I knew, with cold certainty, that whatever was inside had the power to undo 20 years. I pulled open the cord. Inside the pouch were two things. The first was a folded piece of paper. Old and yellow at the edges. The handwriting was neat and careful. I recognized it immediately. I had seen that handwriting only once before, on a birthday card my father had written for me the year before he died. I was 7 then. I still kept that card folded inside the lining of my pillow. The second thing was a small iron key. I unfolded the paper slowly. The entire square was silent. Nobody moved. Not the crowd. Not the chiefs. Not the food sellers. Even the children had gone still. I read the letter once. Then I read it again. My lips moved but made no sound. Then I looked up at my uncle. He stepped back. The letter said this, "My son Adebayo. If you are reading this, then I am gone and my brother has done what I always feared he would do. He has taken the land. He has told everyone that I died poor and foolish. But I was not foolish. Before your uncle bribed the land council and forged my signature, I went to the Oba. I gave him the original land documents. All 27 plots, the cocoa farm, the compound, everything our family owned for 4 generations. The Oba agreed to keep them until you were old enough to claim them. The key in this pouch opens a box in the palace treasury. Inside that box is your inheritance. Do not be afraid. I prepared for this day. Your father, Adekunle. The silence held for a long moment. Then my uncle spoke. That letter means nothing. My uncle's voice was different now. The confidence was gone. What remained was something thinner. Something that was trying to sound calm but was not. It is a forgery, he said. He looked around at the crowd. Anyone can write a letter. Anyone can put a dead man's name at the bottom. He spread his hands. This is a trick. The boy is desperate. A few people murmured. My uncle pressed on. I have the land documents. Official ones. Signed by my brother before his death. Registered with the land council. Anyone can go and check. His voice grew slightly stronger as he spoke, the way a man's voice grows when he is trying to convince himself as much as the people around him. This paper proves nothing. Baba Latif had not moved. He had been standing beside me the whole time, holding his staff, watching my uncle with the patient expression of a man who had heard a great many lies in his long life and was not surprised by one more. Now he spoke. The Oba signed that letter as witness, Baba Latif said. 30 years ago. The royal seal and the Oba's thumbprint are on the original documents inside the treasury. The land council records were reviewed last month at the Oba's instruction. The murmuring in the crowd stopped. Last month? I said. Baba Latif turned to me. The Oba has been preparing for this day for a long time, Adebayo. My uncle's mouth was open. But no words came out. Your uncle is not a stupid man, Baba Latif told me quietly as we walked away from the festival square. The crowd parted to let us through. I could feel eyes on my back. I could feel my uncle standing somewhere behind me, watching, but I did not turn around. He covered his tracks carefully. Baba Latif continued. He paid the right people. He got the land council secretary to record the transfer. He found 2 men to sign as witnesses. By the time your father died, the paperwork looked clean. Then how did the Oba know? I asked. Because your father told him. Before any of the forgery happened. Baba Latif paused. Your father came to the palace 3 months before he died. He was sick then, though not many people knew it. He came to the Oba and said he had a feeling his time was short. He said his brother had already started asking questions about the land, making small comments, visiting the land council office without any clear reason. We walked in silence for a moment. Your father said, Kabiyesi, I am not afraid to die. But I am afraid for my son. My brother will take everything the moment I am gone. He handed over the original documents. He wrote the letter. He gave the Oba instructions. Baba Latif looked at me. He thought of everything, your father. My throat was tight. Why did nobody tell me? I asked. Because your father said not to. Baba Latif said simply. He said if you knew, you would fight your uncle too early. He said you needed to be ready first. I thought about that the rest of the walk. The palace was on the highest ground in Ijesaland. I had passed the gates many times in my life, always from the outside, always on my way somewhere else. As a child I used to look through the carved wooden panels and wonder what the inside looked like. Now Baba Latif was walking me through those gates. The compound inside was bigger than I had imagined. Wide and cool and green, with tall trees and swept earth paths that wound between low white buildings. The walls were decorated with patterns I had seen before on fabric and on the drums at festival time, the symbols of the Ijesaland kings going back 500 years. Old men sat on benches in the shade, talking quietly. Women moved between buildings carrying items wrapped in cloth. A group of young men near one of the far buildings looked up as we passed. Nobody stopped us. Nobody asked who I was. But I noticed that people looked at me. Not the way strangers usually look at someone unfamiliar. They looked at me the way people look at someone they have been expecting. It unsettled me. Baba Latif, I said. Why do they look at me like they know me? The old man smiled without turning his head. Because some of them do, he said. Your father visited this palace many times. And you look exactly like him. We stopped at a large carved door. Baba Latif knocked twice. The room was large and simply furnished. A wide chair made of dark carved wood sat at one end. Woven mats covered the floor. Lamps burned low along the walls, giving the air a warm amber color. The Oba sat in the carved chair. I had seen the Oba twice in my life, both times from a distance, during festival processions. From far away, a king looks like a symbol. Up close, he looked like a man. An old man with deep-set eyes and a quiet way of holding himself, like someone who had learned long ago that stillness carried more weight than noise. He looked at me for a long moment. You look like your father, he said. Something tightened in my throat. It was the second time I had heard those words that evening. He was a good man, the Oba continued. Too gentle for the world he lived in, but wise in his own way. He leaned forward slightly. He came to me 30 years ago. He sat in this room, in that same spot where you are sitting. He said, Kabiyesi, I cannot fight my brother with fists. But I can leave my son something stronger than fists. He paused. He meant truth, the Oba said. Documented. Witnessed. Preserved. I held the iron key in my closed hand. Are you ready to see what he left you? The Oba asked. I nodded. He nodded to the servant near the door. The servant walked out. The room was quiet for a moment. Then I heard footsteps returning. The box was smaller than I had imagined. I had spent the walk from the festival to the palace imagining something large and dramatic, a chest, perhaps, or a locked trunk. What the servant said on the mat in front of me was a box about the size of a cooking pot. Made of dark wood. Old and smooth from years of handling. With a single iron lock in the front. I looked at the lock. I looked at the key in my hand. My heart was beating very fast. I put the key in. It turned. The box opened. Inside were papers. Many papers. Each one folded and tied with a thin cord. Each one had a name written on the outside in my father's handwriting. I could see names of plots, names of boundaries, names of neighboring farms. I picked up the first document and untied it with shaking hands. It was a land title. For Plot 1 of the family compound. My great-great-grandfather's name at the top. My grandfather's name below it. My father's name at the bottom. Dated clearly. Witnessed. And at the very end, pressed into the paper in deep red ink, the Oba's royal seal. I picked up the second document. Then the third. 27 plots in total. The cocoa farm. The compound. All of it. Everything my uncle had claimed for 20 years was here, in this box, under the royal seal of the Ijesaland Oba. My father had saved everything. There was one more item at the bottom of the box. A letter. This one was not from my father. I could tell immediately from the paper, thicker and whiter than my father's letter. The handwriting was different too. Formal and careful, the kind of writing learned in a palace. At the top, the royal seal was pressed in red. I read it slowly. It had been written 20 years ago, 2 years after my father's death. It was addressed to no one and everyone, in the style of a formal declaration. It said that the Oba had reviewed the land transfer documents presented by Adebayo, my uncle, and found them inconsistent with original records held in the palace. It said that my uncle's 2 witnesses had been questioned separately and given contradictory accounts of when and where the transfer papers were signed. It said the Oba had reason to believe the documents were forged. But it also said that the law of Ijesaland required an heir to be of age before a claim could be formally submitted. And it said that the Oba was bound by a personal promise to my father to wait for the appointed day. You knew for 20 years, I said quietly. I was not accusing him. I was simply trying to understand. Yes, the Oba said. And you said nothing. I kept my promise to your father. He met my eyes steadily. He asked me to wait. He had his reasons. I looked down at the letter in my hands. He wanted your uncle to be comfortable, the Oba said. He wanted your uncle to be laughing. He wanted the whole village to see exactly what kind of man Bai Dunajayi was, before everything was taken from him. There is one more thing, the Oba said. He nodded to the servant a final time. The servant walked to a small shelf near the wall and returned carrying a cloth-wrapped object. Small. Flat. The size of a book. He set it in front of me. I unwrapped it slowly. It was a photograph. Old and slightly faded at the edges, the way photographs from 30 years ago look when they have been kept in a dry place but not in direct sunlight. Black and white, with a slightly gray middle where the chemicals had shifted with age. 2 men stood together. One of them was the Oba. Much younger than the man sitting across from me now, but recognizable. The same steady eyes, the same way of holding his head. He was smiling. The second man was my father. I had almost no memories of my father's face. A few blurred images from early childhood. The birthday card he left me. One half-dream that came back sometimes when I was very tired. But I knew the face in this photograph immediately. The way you know a face you have seen in your own mirror, because the bones and the lines are the ones you carry yourself. He was holding a baby wrapped in a blue cloth. He was smiling. The baby was me. My father had brought me to this palace on the day I was born. He had stood in this room, with his Oba, and made a promise about the son in his arms. I did not cry in front of the Oba. I waited until I was in the courtyard, under the old trees, before I let myself cry. I did not sleep that night. I sat outside the small room I rented on the edge of town, and watched the sky move from black to purple to the first thin edge of gray. I held the photograph in my hands for a long time. My father's face. My father's smile. The way he was holding me, not like someone holding something fragile, but like someone holding something precious. There is a difference. Fragile things are held with worry. Precious things are held with joy. He had known, even then. Even on the day I was born. He had known that the world he was bringing me into was not safe. He had known his brother. He had known the land would become a problem. And so from the very first day of my life, he had been preparing. I thought about my mother. She had known too. She must have known something. Why else would she teach me silence the way she did? Why else would she say, over and over, that silence was the longest plan? She had died 3 years ago. A quiet death, in the same small room where we had lived for 20 years. I had been with her at the end. I wish she had lived to see this day. I said that to the dark sky, quietly, the way you say things when there is no one around to hear but you need to say them anyway. Then I went inside, lay down on my mat, and waited for morning. Morning came. And with it my uncle. He came alone. No agbada. No gold cap. No polished shoes. No group of friends. He walked up the dusty path to my door wearing a plain white shirt and dark trousers. He looked smaller than he had at the festival. Like someone had let the air out of him overnight. I was sitting outside with a cup of tea when he arrived. I watched him walk toward me and I felt many things at once. Anger, yes, but also something underneath the anger that was harder to name. Something that felt, strangely, like tiredness. 20 years is a long time to carry something heavy. He stopped a few steps away. He did not come closer until I looked at him. Adebayo, he said. I said nothing. I wrapped both hands around my cup. I want you to know. He stopped. Started again. What I did was wrong. I sipped my tea. Your father and I had an argument many years ago, he said. Over the land. Over our father's choices. I was older. I thought I deserved more. He looked at his own hands. I told myself I was correcting an injustice. I told myself your father had taken what should have been mine. Was that true? I asked. He shook his head slowly. No, he said. I know that now. I have known it for a long time. Silence settled between us. The morning birds were singing. Somewhere down the path, a goat walked past without looking at either of us. I want to explain, my uncle said. He did not sit down. He stayed standing, a few steps away, like a man who did not feel he had the right to sit. When your grandfather died, he said, he left the land to your father. Not to me. I was older. I was the firstborn. In every story I had ever heard, the firstborn son received the land. He was quiet for a moment. Your grandfather chose your father because he said your father was more careful. More patient. He almost laughed, a small, dry sound with no joy in it. I was angry for years. I told myself your grandfather had made a mistake. That I would have managed the land better. That I would have made it produce more. And did you? I asked. In 20 years? He flinched. The cocoa farm produced well, he said quietly. On my father's soil, I said. With trees my grandfather planted. He nodded. I cannot undo 20 years, he said. I know that. I cannot give your mother back the years she spent washing other people's clothes. I cannot give you back your schooling. He swallowed. There is nothing I can say that makes any of that right. No, I said. There is not. He turned to leave. Uncle. He stopped without turning. My father forgave you, I said. He told the Oba he held no bitterness. Only concern for me. I paused. I will follow my father. He stood still for a long moment. Then he walked away without looking back. The land council meeting was set for 6 days after the festival. Word had spread quickly. In a small community, news travels the way smoke travels, fast, in all directions, finding every gap. By the morning after the festival, people who had not been present in the square had heard the full story. By the second day, People from neighboring towns knew. I had 3 visitors that week. The first was a young man named Femi, who had grown up near our old compound and remembered my father. He came to shake my hand and said nothing except, "Your father was a good man. I am glad." The second was an old woman who sold pepper at the market. She pressed a small wrapped item into my hands, a bundle of dried herbs that she said brought clarity to the mind before important meetings. The third was the land council secretary. He came nervously, turning his cap in his hands. He was the son of the man who had helped my uncle register the false documents 20 years ago. His father was dead now. He had inherited his father's position and, apparently, his guilt. He told me he was prepared to present the full council records. He told me there were notes his father had made privately, notes admitting that the transfer documents had irregularities, but that he had been paid to ignore them. Those notes had been kept in a locked file for 20 years. "Why are you bringing them forward now?" I asked. "Because I have been waiting for a reason to," he said. The land council hearing was held in the old civic hall near the town center. It was supposed to be a closed meeting. Private. Just the council members, the relevant parties, and their representatives. But by the time I arrived, there were people standing outside the building, 3 rows deep. My uncle arrived separately. He had a lawyer with him. A thin man in a gray suit who carried a leather briefcase and spoke quietly into my uncle's ear as they walked in. I had no lawyer. But I had Baba Latif beside me. And I had a box of documents with the Oodwa's royal seal on every page. The hearing lasted 4 hours. My uncle's lawyer argued for the first hour. He talked about the principle of long possession, that 20 years of occupying and working land created a kind of ownership right. He talked about the difficulty of authenticating documents from 30 years ago. He was careful and thorough. Then the land council secretary opened his father's file. The room changed. The notes were read aloud. Clear and plain. The original transfer documents had been presented to the council secretary by my uncle with an additional payment. The amount was written in the notes, in exchange for recording them without question. My uncle sat very still. His lawyer stopped speaking. He said the transfer documents presented 20 years ago by Adebayo were found to be inconsistent with the council's own archived records, and that the accompanying witness statements contained material contradictions. He said the private notes of the former land council secretary confirmed that the transfer had been facilitated improperly. He said the 20-year land transfer to Adebayo was therefore null and void. He said all 27 plots, including the cocoa farm and the family compound, were to be returned to their rightful heir. He said my name, Adebayo Adekunle. The room was quiet for a moment. Then someone started clapping. Then another person. Then the whole room, including the people standing in the doorway and spilling out onto the path outside. My uncle did not clap. He sat with his hands in his lap and looked at the floor. His lawyer was writing something in a small notebook. I looked at the chairman. I looked at the documents on the table. I looked at my own hands. 20 years old. Torn shirt. Borrowed sandals. Rightful owner of 27 plots and a cocoa farm. I took a slow breath. I went to the land the evening after the council decision. Alone. The family compound was at the edge of the farmland, a wide, low building with a large courtyard that had been in my family for 4 generations. My uncle had been living in it for 20 years. His belongings were still there. The council had given him 30 days to vacate. I did not go inside the building. I walked past it, through the side gate, and into the cocoa farm. The trees were tall now. Full and heavy, the way trees become when they have been properly tended for many years. My uncle had hired workers who knew what they were doing. In this one thing, he had cared for my inheritance. The pods hung in thick clusters along the branches. Dark red and burnt orange in the late afternoon light. Some were just beginning to yellow at the tips. I walked slowly between the rows. I ran my hand along the bark of one tree. Rough and ridged, the way old cocoa trees feel. Solid and permanent, like something that has decided it belongs exactly where it is. These were the trees my grandfather had planted. My father had climbed these trees as a boy. He had carried the harvested pods in baskets, and sung harvest songs with his father on evenings just like this one. I stood among the trees as the sun went down over Ijesaland. And I thought about a boy of 8, walking away from this same place with a torn mat and a cooking pot. That night I read my father's letter again. I had read it many times by then. But each time I read it, I found something new. Not in the words were the same. But in the spaces between the words. In what he had chosen to say and what he had chosen not to say. He never said he hated my uncle. He never said he was angry. He said he was afraid for me. He said he had prepared. He said, do not be afraid. He did not tell me to take revenge. He did not tell me to humiliate my uncle the way my uncle had humiliated me. He said only, your inheritance is waiting. Go and claim it. I thought about the way he had constructed the plan. He had not fought his brother in the open, where a wealthy man with connections would always win. He had moved quietly. He had gone to the one person in Ijesaland whose authority even my uncle could not override. He had preserved the truth in a place where it could not be reached or corrupted. And he had chosen the day carefully. Not just any day. The Yam festival. When the whole community would be present. When my uncle would be at his most visible and most confident. He had wanted witnesses. Not to punish my uncle, I now understood. To protect me. So that whatever my uncle tried to say afterward, forgery, conspiracy, mistake, there would be too many eyes, too many ears, too much public knowledge for any lie to hold. My father had been a genius dressed as a gentleman. The compound needed work. 20 years of another family's living had changed the rooms. New walls had been added in places. The old kitchen had been converted into a storage room. The mango tree in the courtyard that my mother had once described to me had been cut down, and a newer, smaller tree stood in its place. But the bones of the building were the same. The foundation my great-great-grandfather had laid was solid. The courtyard was wide. The rooms were large enough. I hired 2 men to help me clear and repaint. On the second day of work, Femi, the young man who had shaken my hand the week before, arrived in the morning with 3 other men his age. He said nothing except that they had come to help. They worked all day without asking for payment. On the 4th day, the old woman who had given me the dried herbs came and swept the courtyard herself. On the 7th day, the compound began to look like what it had always been. I slept in it for the first time on the 8th night. I lay on my mat in the middle of the main room and looked up at the ceiling. It was quiet. The night sounds came through the open window. Insects, a far-off drum, the soft sound of wind in the cocoa trees. I thought, my grandfather slept here. My father slept here. Now I was home. I closed my eyes. And for the first time in 20 years, I slept without dreaming. 3 months later, I sat under the mango tree in the courtyard. A young tree still, not yet tall enough to give full shade. But growing. I had hired 4 workers for the cocoa farm and was learning everything I had missed in 20 years of being away from the land. An older farmer named Baba Son, who had known my grandfather, came every week to teach me. He said the soil was good. He said with proper care the yield could double in 3 years. I believed him. My uncle had moved to a smaller house on the other side of town. We had not spoken since the morning he came to my door. I did not know what his daily life looked like now, and I found that I did not spend much time wondering. Baba Latif visited once. He sat in the courtyard and accepted a cup of tea and looked around the compound with the expression of a man who had seen something he had been waiting a long time to see. Your father would be pleased, he said. I did not trust my voice enough to answer that. I just nodded. I kept the photograph on the wall of the main room. My father, the Oba, and the baby in the blue cloth. I looked at it every morning when I woke up and every evening before I slept. I could not give my father his years back. I could not bring my mother back to see this. but I could tend the trees he loved. I could honor the land he protected. I could live the life he fought for me to have. That was enough. That was everything. What do you think about this story? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our next captivating tale. Also, share this video with your friends and family. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next story.